Welcome back, believers. This is part two from the video I made last week in regards to the video I titled Godly Man or something, or How to Become a Godly Man, something like that, or Becoming a Godly Man. Excuse me. Um, so I wanted to provide more context with this video, which I'm going to be taking 10 men from the Bible that exhibit great examples of what a biblical man looks like, and it's still continuing the traits of the obedience and the characteristics that they embodied and demonstrated. And for the first example, I'm going to start with Adam. And in my research, I just kind of did a list of the names and some context to help give you guys clarity. But first, we start with Adam, where he was a man entrusted with much responsibility and accountability. This is huge because we often don't look at Adam's story because of the simplicity, and even I guess with him being the original man, or the first man for that matter, where God placed him in the Garden of Eden. And this God gave Adam stewardship and responsibility before companionship. And it's important to note that the responsibility part precedes privilege. So this is often confused nowadays in today's world for a lot of reasons, and we're just kind of out of order and just backwards in many instances. But this is important because we often, I know for myself, I'm like, what is, before just getting more awareness from God, and that's still a continuing process, but I will ask myself, what is a God-fearing man look like? What is the ultimate example of what a man looks like? And I want to preface too with these 10 men outside of Jesus Christ being the perfect one out of the bunch. All of the others had flaws, and all the other ones had mishaps and things that could have easily disqualified them. But God still used them to tell a story, to be a demonstration and an example for us to learn from many years later. So with Adam, it's very unique because people always say Adam and Eve and etc., which that is the case, but Adam came first, and he had responsibility. He had things that he had to cultivate, which meaning like the crops. And so basically with Adam, he had a job essentially before he even had a companion or a wife. And this is very important because I see nowadays just men who jump into relationships before they even have a good grasp of their skill set or who they are. And this always ends up destructive. And I want to just kind of preface you guys out there that are looking to date or want to marry, and I would encourage marry and courtship over just dating or in the casual sense. But before you get to that, just really courting yourself in the sense of learning skills, learning emotional intelligence, learning yourself in intimate ways that would lead to you providing a job for you to sustain yourself, or just providing a job, or you can say a service that God put you here to do. So anytime that order is out of line, you're gonna just have this chaotic foundation where you're not able to lead your wife or your significant other in the right direction, and it's just gonna be really just just out of order, and a lot of craziness will come with that. So, but once a man has confidence in who he is and his skills and what he can provide to the world and his family, of course, that gives him just this strong foundation in which he can continue to pour out of, and that is a reassurance and also builds the man's confidence. So it's really important to acknowledge, even with Adam's story, that he had that responsibility to focus on initially, and everything else came after that. And next is Noah, one of my favorite stories in the Bible and men in the Bible, just because of his sheer obedience, where God is commanding Noah to build an ark, that for a flood that he didn't see until it happened, and everybody else around him thought he was crazy and just out of his mind. But it was so much just evilness and wickedness going on in the world. Of course, they wouldn't be able to see what God was instructing Noah to do. And Noah for himself, I'm sure he was just like, God, like, you sure? Like, I'm looking like a crazy person, or like, man, I don't foresee any rain. But he continued to listen to God over the world and over whatever advice that he was probably getting, even maybe from his family, and chose to continue to build this ark that came many years after. And we apply that to today's society. Sometimes or most of the time, God is calling us to have obedience in all areas of our life. But a lot of times that comes at the cost of having courage, comes at the cost of being ridiculed or being made fun of. But Noah didn't let that stop him or deter him. He kept going, and he was faithful with building. And we all know the story of Noah and his family were the last people left on the earth at the time, after the flood came, along with different pairings of animals. But what if he wasn't obedient? That, like, the whole trajectory would have been different for us today, and just the testimony would be different as well. And next, I'll say Abraham, which Abraham, signifies the trust and the surrender of God, surrendering to God, just with his son Isaac, where God is asking Abraham to sacrifice his son. And we know, all of us, I don't have a son yet, and I had this conversation with an old friend of mine, and we were saying, like, well, would you sacrifice your kid if God asked you to? Or even, because he had just a daughter at the time, but he was having a hard time with that, and rightly so, because it's something that we're like, man, God, you're really asking me to do this, which it could be extreme nowadays, but it makes a great point, where it's like, how much are we willing to give up to be obedient, to surrender, and to trust God with the plan, even though there's so much unknowns and uncertainties in life. And that story where God still allows Abraham to keep his son, he just wanted to see where his faith was at. And a lot of you guys were like, this is crazy. God would prompt Abraham to do that, or command Abraham to do that. But he's calling us to do the same in different areas. So it's just like yielding to God and just asking God, like, whatever you want. And of course, we hope that it's not sacrificing our kid, but he wants us to understand the severity and the importance of the trust and surrendering, and how it comes with a price. And next is Joseph, where this is a story that's often quoted, where Joseph, had the inheritance. He would get the vision from a young age and inherit the coat of many colors. And that did, and even though he was one of the youngest, his older brothers didn't like that and were jealous of him and ended up just trading him off, selling him off as a slave, where he ends up in um, Egypt, uh, where he's a prisoner and ends up getting the keys to the prison, but staying in his frame, in his obedience of still trusting God. And even when his brothers came, Joseph ended up rising to be second in command to Pharaoh. And even though he was just distraught by his brothers like trading him, they didn't even recognize him. But him still having spiritual maturity and just the obedience of God tempered him into being compassionate for his brothers. And when famine broke out, he was able to supply his family and provide for his family that essentially mistreated him and traded him off, hoping that he probably would die or something. So it's very important to no matter what. And then even with Joseph being accused, to cheat with the name is slipping me, might be Pilate, but there was a wife that was trying to seduce him and he wasn't going for it. So that is just important with just temptation in general, and knowing that if you're a man that's following God's way, you're going to be tempted, tested, tried, and distracted to a degree. So it's important to just keep that in mind and prepare yourself for that, because I always say, like, the devil's not after the people he doesn't have anymore. He's after the people that are not doing what he wants them to do, and etc. So it's good to just know that it comes at a price of just having integrity and setting your moral standards of, I'm not gonna belittle myself, and it's not a perfect process, but it's really putting yourself in the right environments, mentally, spiritually, and physically, and having others around you that could also help encourage you and support you. But most importantly, is establishing like a discipline to continue to practice good habits and to keep you away from the bad habits. And next we have Moses, where Moses exhibits, humility and leadership, where, and I'll give you guys verses for all these as well in the description. But with Moses, they said he had a stuttering problem, and also with Moses being shipped off as a newborn, where he ended up being raised in Egypt, amongst the Egypt royalty. This was just kind of a plot twist, because oftentimes when we think of leaders, we're not thinking of leaders that, one, are like basically like adopted into another royal family, or have speaking impediments, or just deficiencies that could hold them back or kind of lessen their status. But with Moses, it's like God used Moses and proved the world, wrong, where Moses didn't even think he was equipped because of those factors of, like, I'm sure with trying to relate with the Israelites and his mixed upbringing, and along with his speaking impediment. So regardless of that, he continued to press forward and to be obedient to God, even though he knew he could have been killed or whatever the case would have been. He didn't allow those things to stop him, and he kept going and really led the Israelites, in that painful but miraculous and wilderness process. And next we have Joshua, where he is the predecessor to, or the one that takes the helm after Moses, but he represents, in Joshua 24:15 it says, "And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." So Joshua serves as another example of just being faithful and not giving into the other gods that the Israelites served, or etc. But he decided to make a proclamation that he will serve God, and his household and those around him will do the same. So it's like, and this is important because he's also establishing a spiritual direction for his home, which is more important now than ever. Because, and I even convicted of myself where just leading my wife and I, and God leading me, of course, I have chosen to lead at times in a worldly way where it's like, all right, as long as you're bringing in money, as long as you're, taking the trash out, or doing all those conventional things. But God used my wife to encourage me in a gentle but painful way that outside of the money and all those things, like, I need to lead more spiritually. I need to prioritize our home in different ways of just being attentive and all those things that nowadays seem just like, just a complimentary thing, but no, it's a necessity. And it was a rude awakening, but in a good way for me, because it was like I was prioritizing the wrong things, even though I had good intent and motives, but I had to understand that I needed to be present in a spiritual way for my wife and others, in regards to my home. And that's when we started to just pray more together. We started to read the word more every week, and just having just soul enriching conversations to build each other up, and to just see how God is moving in our life and where he's wanting us to go. And then we have next the story of David, which David, the man after God's own heart, which some would be like, this is kind of controversial because didn't he sleep with somebody's wife, and didn't he kill the husband, or have the husband of the wife he cheated with killed? But David shows how repentance and heart, realignment happens for the journey of a man of God, because we're not going to always be perfect, but that doesn't give us the license to sin or to disobey God. But I like how David says in Psalm 51:10, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." This is so important because it's so easy to have pride and to like say, I'm just gonna own this sin or mishap that I did and just let it go or whatever, or like just accept my consequences. But David is suggesting that, Lord, I may have fallen short, but I want you to renew my soul, cleanse me, make me whole again, and to just strengthen me and heal me. And that's very vulnerable and humble to do that, but that is required, even if we have to do that every day or 100 times a day. we need to be in that mindset and that heart posture, because that allows God to do the work within us, that redeems us, and allows us to move forward, because we're not moving forward, even though it may feel like it monetarily, physically, whatever the case is. In reality, we're not moving forward. So this is key and very pertinent, for the growing man. And then you have Daniel, a great example of discipline and devotion, where he has consistent faith under pressure, and how he didn't fold in Daniel 6:10. It says, "Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime." So this was powerful, because everybody knows the story of the lions in the den, Daniel, but he has this private devotion that is powerful, because a lot of times now we see spirituality as this public display, or these public antics where we're looking at the preacher in the pulpit, or we're looking at gospel music, or we're looking at maybe like even volunteering efforts, or whatever the case is, of like, oh, this person, or this is a demonstration of like God moving in our life or in their life. And that's not negating that, but we see how in private, how Daniel having this fortitude and this consistent fortitude to pray and to come before God in a private manner, because that is gonna empower the man publicly and in all areas of context. So establishing that routine spiritually outside of the routine of all these other things, like, without I notice more men are like, they have this workout routine, or just their job routine, or whatever the case is. But those things come in, those things are a poor second place, third place, or whatever to the spiritual discipline. And I've seen that just pay dividends in my life, because when I jump straight into work without doing my devotion and praying, it's just a chaotic day. I don't have like control over my day, in the sense that I have a sharp mind. I'm prepared for whatever comes at me, and all those things. So Daniel, doing these things is a really great example. And even in doing this process, I kind of just learned how to extract the elements of what a man looks like, because like I was mentioning in the previous video, we're told these kind of generic descriptions instead of like stories that basically lay out what these men were doing, and like the character and the qualities that they were also doing it with and for, which is just way more impactful to me than just kind of these generic notions or labels that we go by as far as what a man is, or a godly man is. And also, one of my other favorite characters, we have Job, which represents many things, but endurance and faithfulness through the suffering. And we have in Job 1:21, he said, and said, "Naked came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord have taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." So I can't stress this one. I can't stress this one even more, because for me, I've seen this to be so true. I have suffered and endured a lot of things, and a lot of times I just felt like quitting. And that's including, having moments of sickness physically, being, mentally not at ease, or just job changes, or even different experiences that I've had on the job or with others, caused me to just really just lean to God more in a more ironic way, because a lot of times we're like, oh, if we lean on our family or others or support system, that'll help us through. But God has shown me almost in the opposite, where it's like, not like you can't lean on people, but ultimately you only can really lean on me as far as trusting me, um, to help you through your situation, to heal you through your situation, to deliver you from your situation, because the world's gonna always let you down, but God will never let you down, even though maybe for the most part, His timing is gonna be different than your timing. So Job being that representative of being one of the most faithful and faithful servants of God at the time, and having been blessed with so much land and resources and wealth in general, Satan wanted to try to prove God wrong with testing Job, one of God's servants. And even though his wife wanted Job to curse God and die, or just to get him out of his misery, and that's a pretty vivid example when he was under, the sickness he was under. It goes to show your wife or people around you may not agree or may tell you some things otherwise, but it's important to like persevere in your own like presence, in your own like situation, and allowing God to steward you out of it, because no one really can see what God is doing in your life or how you're going about things. They can see certain things, but they can't see the full story. Or so it's important to just know that. And even his friends, they were like, maybe you have done something wrong, or all these things. So just realizing that your community or your village, or people around you may get things wrong as far as like their advice, or may just give you a perspective that is not from God. So it's important to just discern that and understand that your devotion relationship with God is deeper and more important than those perspectives or people that's trying to give you advice. That could go either way, but God doesn't give us advice or direction that goes in either other way. He gives us the best and sound advice, regardless to popular opinion. So, and then it was like, it showed how God gave him back more, or just returned all the things that Job lost, which that's not what we do it for, but it shows that nothing is in vain when it comes to God, and how He continues to look out for us and grow us and develop us. So it's very important to just trust that and believe that, and that is more powerful, because you will lose things, you will experience difficult moments in your life, or very difficult moments in your life, but how do you stay locked in with God and allow Him to lead you through it? And then we have lastly Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the perfect model of manhood, a man who committed no sin, but proved to be the perfect demonstration, where we have in verse Luke 22:42 saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. So all throughout the Bible, and most specifically in the New Testament, you see Jesus yielding himself to God, because even though there's the Trinity, God sent Jesus to earth basically to lower himself in the form of man, so that he could basically experience, and I think just to really walk out what it is to be not only a man of God, but like a true believer, that's relying on God for everything, and just living it out with how he was serving people, serving others, how he ministered to others, um, and how he had love and sacrificial love and obedience for others, even though he was also, you know, you can say, I would imagine Jesus being outspoken in that time of, speaking his mind, but still having a temperance to him where it allows those to receive what he's saying without, um, thinking like, oh, he's trying to attack me. And I think a great story is like where he meets the lady at the well on his way through Samaria, I believe, where he already knew her situation, but he knew how to convey it to her to help her know that um, he knew, or the truth is more important than setting her free, but still having a way to convey it, to not like condemn her or judge her, but to, because the story goes along the lines where she was a promiscuous woman, who she had slept with many men, but Jesus didn't look at her for what she did, but he looked past it to her soul posture, and how he just wanted to like help her, heal her, just with his presence and his anointing. Um, and it's also like, I always imagine Jesus as, a person, a man that walked with people. And it's so symbolic, rather than running, especially now, today's society, because everything is so like, everybody's fixated, including myself at times, of being like a instant gratification or a microwave. But Jesus actually was the opposite of walking with people, walking with relationships, in the sense of taking his time, but being efficient, and um, just being truth, and then even putting it on the line at the end where he was convicted or persecuted on the cross. Uh, he could have easily cast down legions on top of legions of angels to just create a whole spiritual reckoning on the world, and more specifically on those who were persecuting him wrongly so. But he didn't. He put it all on him to pay the ultimate price that we get to benefit from today, is having a personal relationship with God, and even having redemption and forgiveness, that Jesus had to pay the price for. So to translate this to the ultimate man of God, we would never amount to that level, but we can still exhibit those same qualities, where things may not always be beneficial for us, or we may not be always liked or respected, but being able to demonstrate what that selfless and authentic and gentle, but stern at times, and even the resilience to avoid sin when the devil tried to tempt Jesus in the desert. He said, I can give you the world, which is astronomically crazy, because it's like Jesus in a way already had it. So it's like these foolish enticements that I think the godly man experiences as well to their own right. It's like, well, it's like, I can make you these offers to give you fame or money, or give you all these kingdoms, but if we think about it, we already have the riches and the wealth spiritually. We're just here on this earth to continue to embody God-like qualities, to make God proud, and all this other stuff doesn't matter. It's trivial. So it's important to not trade your values, trade your integrity, trade your obedience for approval or for earthly pleasures. And I just want to leave you guys with that. I hope this video provided you guys with some great value. And it's always a pleasure getting to just share my insights and the experiences that God has afforded me with you guys. And I'm looking forward to the next one. Peace.